Hello and welcome to Wrestlers and People podcast. Now here's your host, Jay Lamrod.
Yeah. So, hey, Brandon, how are you?
I'm doing great. How are you?
Yeah, very well, thank you. Thank you for agreeing to take the time to speak to me. I mean, it's a big honor. Obviously, I'm a big fan of what you've been doing so far. I've been following it closely in terms of the posting on Instagram. And, it's one of those things where people around the world, like myself, who are 6,000 miles away know about GSW. So this is the beginning of something special, especially from a fan's perspective, but also probably for you as well, to kind of realize actually people are discovering this, from all corners of the world. So thank you. Thanks for joining me. And, thanks for taking the time.
Thank you. I appreciate it. And it's amazing to me that I just realized that there are people like yourself that are discovering us outside of the country. And it's been, a humbling and honoring experience.
Yeah, absolutely. I want to, I've heard, a couple of the interviews, and it's really, really nice and inspiring to hear the story of how it came about. Your background in film must help tremendously, and your creativity, but also how you began in wrestling, with body slam and things like that. But leading up to all of that, first and foremost, just from a fan's perspective, how was Inception for you? Because what a way to kick off, a promotion, to have a stacked card, obviously main event being Aries and Hammerstone, but from top to bottom, I mean, it was incredible. What's your post-show feelings so far?
I mean, for me, I personally am excited about the show. I loved it. From a promoter standpoint, I really don't care what I think. It's more about what others who saw it thought, and the feedback that we've gotten, the reception has been incredible. We've gotten, the worst review we got was it's just as good as like a WWE or AEW show. And while we're not really going for that style, being it's just as good as the number 1 and 2 wrestling company in the world. It's well, that's actually kind of a compliment to we've gotten one of the best top to bottom indie shows people have seen. A couple places rated a lot of our matches 4 stars and up out of 5, which is really great. So honestly, in that regard, I couldn't be happier about how it went.
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting to hear the feedback regarding the comparisons to WWE, because I think the theme for me was very kind of apparent. I can see the sport-like nature to it. I think that having the appearances, especially from Dickinson at the end, for example, I think that was good in terms of storytelling. So yeah, I could understand why people might see the comparison, but I still very much feel the sport vibe that you're putting out, that hard hitting style, which is hopefully going to become more and more apparent as you do more shows. I mean, following that, obviously, with what they've said, what fans have said, and viewers and spectators, what's been the feedback between you and your partner and the kind of the close circle around you, friends, family? What do they think? How do they think it went?
Well, and another thing that also tells me that it was a hit in a good way was I didn't even know my mom and my aunt and my cousin were going to tune in and watch the stream. And they're just like, holy crap, that was a good show. And I'm like, you don't even like wrestling. They're like, no, we can't stand it. We think it's stupid. But they're like, that was really entertaining. And I'm like, if I could get non-fans, not even watched it when they were younger, non-fans, then we did something right, at least. They got the idea of what we were trying to do. It worked. I mean, between my partner and I, we can't stop rewatching the show, which is, when I'm in film, I make a movie, I watch it 20 times over anyway, but for 2-hour and 30-minute long wrestling show, I usually wouldn't watch it more than once or twice after, but we're still like, oh my God, we got to watch it again. Oh, I got to double check the main event. So we're giddy about it almost.
Yeah, of course. And it's a good feeling, when you've done something right. You kind of, you want to kind of relive that, and you want to kind of keep that momentum going. I mean, it's only been two weeks and a bit since the show, so it's still very fresh. It's still fresh in everyone's mind. There's, I think people are still talking about it, and the content that you're getting from that is only kind of feeding what's going to come next. You kind of set the bar now. You set the tone. We're on route. You could say we're on the road to Catalyst. You could say. How do you feel about kind of going into Catalyst now? Are you more confident now that you've done a show and you know how it feels? What are some of the thoughts kind of going through your head?
Well, and it's like anything, I was involved in wrestling to a degree, only from a training, and I wouldn't even really call it a performing aspect because I never had an official debut. I was just like a planted fan or something. But having been in locker rooms before still didn't really help when you transition into like, oh, you're the one in charge running the whole show and handling all the moving pieces. So this, like anything for a first time, was a learning experience. And there were things that we took from that we would do differently for Catalyst and going forward. And I think it's one of those things where you do it once, you learned what did work. And thankfully, I'd say 75% of the stuff we were doing worked. And then there were a couple little things, like we had some technical glitches with the stream, and so we're just hitting the ground, figuring out, what we need to do to get the internet signal stronger in a place that doesn't have great internet. And that way the stream won't have any glitches, figuring out more cameras, how can we make like the entrance look better, and just like what are some things that we didn't have enough of that we're going to add. Like we didn't think as much in depth about how many flights were coming in at different times, and like I needed a camera person to go run and pick somebody up. I needed my dad and his girlfriend to go get somebody, and I'm like, all right, next time we just need to hire one person, give them a van, go pick everybody up, maybe get 1 or 2 Ubers instead of like 8. Like there's just a lot of little things that like we should have thought out a little better and we didn't, and that's something that we're ready and raring to go for the next one.
Yeah, and also now that you know those small kind of logistic things, it must be a great feeling, or it must be you must be way more confident now going into the second show, knowing this is the stuff that I just need to, these small tweaks, once I get those kind of down. I mean, that's, having a van, preparing that, it's minor in the grand scheme of things. And once you nail those things, everything else looks so much more easy. There's so much less stress or less things to think about or worry about.
Right. And you're 100% right. Now that we figured out, though, and that's the important thing. It's like, if we went into it and it was something that was major, like it was creative, or it was like how we handled talent or something and how we communicated with people, that's a bigger problem. Just like figuring out, all right, an easier way to get people from the airport or something, who cares? That's an easy thing that we could fix. But since we didn't have any of the glaring possible issues, that just made us like, all right, well, everybody liked us, everybody wants to come back. Like that was the important stuff, and that wasn't a problem. So everything else is just an easy fix, I think.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, in terms of the show itself, the card, obviously some incredible talent on there, and it's very enjoyable to see some of the names there. I'm a fan of Holiday, so I like that, and also even the main event for me was what really set the tone, in terms of just enjoying it and everything, and just kind of looking forward to what's next. Is there anything regarding that card that you would do? Not differently, but like have a different approach towards for the next show? Is there any kind of thoughts about that you think, what, actually, I'd try this, or I'd try doing this, or maybe I didn't get to do that, or do you know what I mean?
Well, one thing that we missed out on, I mean, as far as like the way the card went, we had changes that occurred, for one issue or another that we had to put different talent on there. And I think it all worked out for the best. I think the way that we started the show with Elgin and Wrecking Ball, I think they really set the pace for that, like, strong style, hard hitting, like, all right, this is what they're presenting. It's serious. And each match after that worked with it. But one thing that I wanted involved that we weren't able to was we really wanted more backstage things to go on, like whether it was just a pre-match interview with Hammerstone and Aries, or we get a shot. Like a good example would be when Dragon Gate USA did their first show, Enter the Dragon, in the US. The way they built that main event, where it's like, okay, after the second match or something, you see Doi and Shingo in the locker room, like lacing up their boots. Okay, then later on in the show, quick interview for a minute or two, and then go from there. But because of the way the building was laid out, there was no way for us to get a camera in there and have the signal make it to the stream. So it just was something that we couldn't do there. And we're figuring out how we're going to be able to add that at the different venue that we're at for the next show. And it should be possible.
Yeah, I mean, it makes perfect sense, and it's funny because obviously your how your mind works is way more creative in that film, kind of with that film background. So it makes perfect sense that you're saying this. And also, if you do, I mean, I wouldn't know how to kind of suggest what to suggest for a live stream. That is something that you would have to really think about. But for something that involves post production, it's, you know, obviously it would be so easy to kind of fit that in there, and it would give it that kind of sport feel once again, kind of going back to the competitor doing up their laces or their wrist tape or whatever it is, you know, preparing, and just those small kind of subtle kind of hints that this is big, you know, this is big, and we're kind of getting there. But speaking of the film school, obviously you mentioned you were in film school, you mentioned you've done production before in that, and you've kind of got a lot of experience in that. I know you've only done one show, but I like to be ambitious with future goals and things. Have you ever how do you feel about the whole kind of cinematic approach to matches? Is that something you would ever consider in the future, using your experience for?
Well, I think I don't really, it really depends. I think the way that cinematic matches have been handled, I don't really think is good. When it comes to like a wrestling product, I am 100% a purist. I want to see in-ring fighting. To me, it's a simulated fight. When it becomes a movie, I'm aware that it's a movie. It's different. Like if I'm watching an action movie, okay, people are fighting, but the idea is to make it as realistic as possible. So the idea of, 'cause that's my start in film, was doing fight scenes. And I'm very particular when I film fight scenes about a certain look. And that look I've tried to translate to GSW. So if you watched any of the YouTube matches we did for High Voltage, it's very like handheld. It's very like gritty and raw. A couple of the techniques are like you shoot with a really fast shutter speed. That makes movement look clearer, like when they're throwing a punch or something. It doesn't have that blur to it. And shooting sometimes at a faster frame rate will also help with that, and just how you light it. So I take sort of like the elements that I would do in a fight scene for film, and I try to film my wrestling shows like that. But the idea of doing like for like a boneyard match or something like that, where you go to a cinematic location, I don't like that.
Yeah, I can see what you mean about that, and you can kind of pick it apart in a way, especially when you have an eye for it and that experience. It makes sense. I mean, the good thing about having High Voltage, I think, it gives you the opening or the opportunity to fit the segments you were mentioning earlier about kind of building things up, just gradually, just kind of fitting it in there in between a match, here and there, just this is happening at the next show, kind of things like that. Is that the plan going forward? Are you going to kind of keep High Voltage in line with each event and then just kind of use High Voltage as a kind of like a build up for each show?
Yeah, it's kind of like a mostly done puzzle. The brand itself, it is really our developmental brand, but what it's going to do is each episode is going to have another piece that takes you in the puzzle that gets you to the next show. So for instance, we did film backstage interviews with everybody that was there, and you'll see we decided, instead of like what you were saying, re-edit the show with the interviews in there, put it into each episode of High Voltage. So you'll see stuff like that. We'll promote like the website and stuff. You will see 1 to 2 matches in each episode. It's going to be a 30-minute time slot, so about 22 minutes of actual video time. And it'll be like a match. If it's a longer match, it's 1. If it's a shorter match, you'll have 2 in an episode. And that'll be cut in with some backstage stuff, some highlights from for each match that happened at Inception, and that leads up to Catalyst, and then after Catalyst, it'll lead up to the next one, and so on and so forth.
Nice. I mean, I think I heard you mention that High Voltage is also that sort of opportunity to use local talent more and kind of build that up, because essentially you can use that to kind of create some stars who can then kind of maybe then be on those bigger shows and have that, and they'd also have the foundation of having worked on High Voltage to kind of, you know, launch them into having a bit more kind of a name going into the show. Would that be something that you would consider, to kind of use that as a grounds to just create stars, create more GSW kind of, talent?
You might have seen it all. If you saw the match, the Battle Royal to crown the first Next Gen champion on there, and Gio won it, and Gio was on Inception. So the original idea behind it was that the belt, whether it's the men's or the women's, Masha has the women's belt. That belt is supposed to be the piece that allows you to be on the main show. So whoever the champion on the show is now has a guaranteed spot on those shows. Because of, you know, talent changes and stuff like that, and not having enough people, there are a couple others that'll trickle over from time to time, like Wrecking Ball was also on High Voltage, but he was on the show. But the only guaranteed spot that you will be on the show is if you have the belt on that on High Voltage. So the idea is that, yes, we want to build local stars at the same time as you have to earn your shot to be on the main show. Whoever has the belt, guaranteed it. Everybody else, not so much. So it's kind of a way to storyline it a little bit to where it makes sense how it happens. So Masha and Gio were both on the main show.
Yeah, and also once again, from that sport aspect, it's an incentive, because it kind of, if you're on High Voltage or you have the opportunity to wrestle a match there, you're competitive because you want to be the next gen champ, essentially, because you want to be on the show. So you've kind of created that kind of, there's that subtle undertone of competition. It's like, you need this to go there, you know, it's there to take.
Yep, and you got to prove it. At the same time, though, one thing that we offer our talent is we offer acting classes. So anyone who's wrestled for us, whether they still do or they did before, once a month right now we're doing acting lessons to help them develop their character, get more comfortable cutting promos. When I was studying wrestling, and from what I've heard from a lot of other people, you know, they kind of teach you to cut a promo, just get across the who, what, when, where, why, and how. And that doesn't really help you do it effectively in character or as yourself, which is even harder than being in character. So the idea of having like a professional acting coach that can teach you, like, all right, this is an exercise you could do to help get your mind in this place, I think is going to be valuable in the long run for any of our young talent.
Yeah, without a doubt. I mean, I didn't know that you even offered that. So that's a great tool for a lot of the people there. That's an incredible kind of tool at their disposal that they can use and capitalize on. Acting classes are so important. You know, I used to do acting classes, and we used to do this exercise where you have to pretend to eat like a giant, like a jawbreaker, like a gobstopper candy thing, just to get your face moving. And I honestly believe that would help a wrestler show facial expressions in the ring. Just being able to move your face around and be comfortable doing it, and in all directions. And it's such a simple acting thing that, you know, all actors learn to do. But if we could just take that and put that in the wrestling world, all of a sudden you now have the ability to just convey stories through your face, which is massive when you're in the ring and everybody's looking and there are cameras on you. So it's a great tool that they have to do once a month acting classes. And hopefully that could be something that kind of becomes more than once a month once kind of things go back to normal, right?
Well, that we started before Inception, we did twice. And then after Inception, we're doing once a month. The idea is just until we have more revenue coming in. You know, I have a huge discount from a connection that I know, but still, you know, until we have more income, it would be too expensive to do it every week. But one funny story that I enjoy, my favorite lesson that they put them through on improv so far in class, which I did it when she taught me, was improv. And the situation was she would call one guy and one girl, and she tells the girl, okay, so you can't say anything, but your exercise for this lesson is you're trying to tell your boyfriend that you're pregnant. Okay. And just, you can't flat out say it. You have to kind of work it into the conversation, but he can't know until you let him know. And then she'll call the guy and say, so your secret that you have in this is that you just found out that you're impotent and you can't have kids. So now they both have to dance around this conversation because, first of all, he's not going to want to say that because it's embarrassing. And she's also like, okay, I have to tell him. And then as soon as he finds out, the reaction is so natural because they're not expecting it. And it's things like that that help you, because most people can't just have a conversation and say, boom, this is how I feel. Usually there's a dance around that, and that helps when you're trying to cut a promo in front of fans because it makes it more real and emotive. So that's something like things like that they're training and developing. Same thing with the facial expressions, because especially in film, less is more, less dialogue, more expressing and emoting, and that's something that we're trying to really teach them how to do.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know many other or any other promotions that are thinking about this in that way that you just mentioned. So I think that's pretty original. And also that, I mean, you can only imagine that you're going to be creating some really good quality talent if people stick to that. If people commit to that and actually take those tools and adopt it and learn it and develop and grow, you can only imagine that the overall quality of promos for GSW is just going to increase exponentially.
Yep, 100%. And we've had, I'd say, about 3 that have been pretty consistent so far. Other ones, take one, they don't come back, then they come in randomly. But for the most part, they're seeing the value in it, which is good. And, the longer that we do them for, the more people are going to know about it and the more that'll come into the class. And I think it's just something cool, and hopefully it works and they learn from it.
Definitely. Yeah. I mean, I can only imagine it would work and it would be super beneficial. And I think when they see that reflecting in their work, I think more and more people are going to come, like you said. One thing I heard you say, and I couldn't find it for the life of me, is the app that you're in development of.
Mm-hmm.
How's that getting along? And what was the motivation behind it?
The app, I mean, one thing that we learned, actually, a friend of ours that owns Urban Action Showcase in New York. It's a big action movie film festival. And we had a long talk with him, and one of his key points was ownership is key. He's like, if you're on Fight TV, if you're on some other platform, if you're on YouTube, you're kind of like renting space. They control the information of who signs up. You don't even get the emails of the people who signed up, and creating that mailing list is the most important thing. So owning your own platform is really the best way to keep your audience long term. So the app has been something that we're working on. The web portion is completely done. The Android app is 90% done. You could technically, if you go on the website, you could see the shell of the web app, but it's nowhere. We're not launching it yet because we're waiting for the Android and iPhone to be done, and then we're looking into how we can get to Roku TV and all the other smart TVs. But right now it's still I wouldn't even call it beta yet because it's not ready to launch. So it's not out there yet, but it is in development. It's coming soon. We're hoping maybe in another month or 2, maybe by Catalyst, but it's been a slower process than we thought it was going to be.
But it's a great idea. I mean, like you said, to own the content, but also to see the subscribers and be able to maybe track analytics and see that growth and see kind of where the traffic is coming from and who's downloading it, where people are signing up from. I think that's great, because then you'll truly be able to see the scope of the growth globally that you have, and not just in the States but everywhere internationally. So that's pretty cool. And if it is just a matter of just download and sign up, then that's great, because everyone has a smartphone, everyone has an iPhone or the latest Android. So it's super easy, it's super accessible. You don't need a laptop or computer to just kind of go on YouTube and watch things. You can actually just see matches and shows and promos and interviews and things like that right in your hand, which is really the future. I feel like more and more people are watching YouTube on their phone nowadays than on big desktops.
Yeah, and I'd even go as far as to say that it's the present. I think most people are watching YouTube on their phone, they're watching it on their tablet, anywhere from like a 4-inch screen to a 10-inch screen. I am a purist of film too, so when I go downstairs, I have my 120-inch pull-down projector screen. I don't like looking at stuff on my phone, but I know that that's where it's at, and that's important. So, and it's going to be high voltage will be on there for free. And if you make an account, subscribe, it'll be a subscription like WWE, but half the price. You would get access to all the paid content. We're working on original documentaries, actually one about the making of GSW, one about wrestling during the coronavirus. We've got a whole bunch of stuff documentary-wise that we're working on too that'll be on there.
Nice. That's exciting. Well, speaking of the pandemic and the corona and everything, obviously you've started a promotion during the most difficult time in recent kind of times in our generation, certainly.
Mm-hmm.
For a lot of the fans, of course, a lot of the listeners, sorry, are British wrestling fans. So, and we're diehard wrestling fans. We love finding new things, whether it's in the States or in Canada or in Mexico or in Japan. We love trying to discover the next thing. So I think GSW has the potential to be that next thing that, really breaks out. And next thing you know, you'll have British wrestling fans who are diehard into it. What is it like, if you were to explain to them the thought process behind launching a promotion during a pandemic, how would you even describe that?
Well, it's kind of a two-parter. My belief, and we had this conversation before we decided to launch the company, like in late October, early November was when we're like, all right, this is going to happen in February. And we had said, should we wait until after the pandemic's over? We were also like itching at the vein because we really wanted to do something. But my ultimate thing was, if you could start a company during arguably the hardest time of your life and survive, then you could survive anything. So if we could start GSW now, we survived the pandemic, which, if you think about it from a financial standpoint, I have to spend extra money to have people there to check temperatures. I have to have extra people there to make sure that everybody's, and we have to be even more on top of the wrestlers, get your COVID test. You got a mask when you're not here. I'm sure some of you know that not everybody's a huge fan of wearing a mask. That was in our locker room. And at the same time, our in-person attendance, we lost 75% of our revenue because we're only allowed 25% of people in there. So the necessity of the live stream is more evident now than ever before, because even if we had 100% occupancy in there, we wouldn't break even on that card. So we knew that we needed to rely on the live stream regardless, but a lot of the cost offsetting was in, well, if we could have 500 people there instead of 50 to 80, then that would be great, but we couldn't. So it's just like those things really worked against any company that's running right now. But at the same time, we survived it. We're ready to go for the next show, and it's only going to get better from here.
And in New Jersey, is it? I mean, I'm not too kind of educated on each state and what the laws are like. But is it a little bit more lax in New Jersey, or what are the restrictions like over there?
It depends on what state you compare it to. If you compare it to like a Florida, a Texas, a Mississippi, then we're like full lockdown. If you compare it to New York, a little bit more lax. So technically we were allowed 35% as long as you could keep people 6 feet apart and masks and all that. But in my opinion, the percentages really don't mean anything, because you have a venue that's X amount of square feet. If I have to keep each person 6 feet apart, then that's like 1 every 3 seats. So then you're really, no matter what, even if they say you could have 75%, but they have to be 6 feet apart, you really only could fit 25%. So no matter how you look at it, it's whatever the percentage is doesn't matter until the actual distancing between the seats goes away. But we had about 25% capacity.
Okay. So I mean, it was still doable, but of course, given within the means of what you had, you kind of had to deal with the cards you were dealt with and make it work.
Yep.
How was it in terms of getting the talent there, and in terms of kind of, I guess, like you said, there are people getting flown in and picked up, and is that something that you also have to think about, because people are coming from different directions, so it's not just the fans coming in, but it's the talent that you have to make sure are okay themselves, and then obviously they're mingling and meeting each other in the kind of under one roof, which you're responsible for. How did that feel? I mean, what was how did that work for you?
I mean, and I'll go back to the feedback that we've gotten. We had a couple of fans that actually did like a student blog post, and they interviewed a whole bunch of the fans. Everybody said they felt completely comfortable and safe in the venue. Now, whatever the guidelines are, we follow, and we even go above and beyond. Like, we do the temperature checks, you got the hand sanitizing stations, the wrestlers had to get the COVID tests, wear a mask when they're not performing in the locker room, all that stuff that they recommend that we do, just to make sure everybody's safe. In terms of like getting them from the airport, we tried to get as many flights as possible within like 15 minutes of each other landing, so we could maybe just pick up one person, wait 10 minutes, other person walks out, which was the best we could do. Again, now I think we're going to probably have 1 or 2 PAs that we hire specifically just to make the trips over there, because some of the hands that we needed on site had to make trips to go and get talent, which is not optimal. It added to more time in setting up because we didn't have everybody there. So just little things that we could do to improve. But as far as like everybody being under the same roof, talent was totally fine, comfortable. The locker room environment was excellent. Everybody was happy. They loved the show. It was cool because I could see in the back where the locker room was, I could see like 4 of the wrestlers like sticking their heads out watching the show. So they must have enjoyed it too. And the fans, from top to bottom, they were pretty much, I think, like 6 out of 7 matches had "this is awesome" chants, which is always good to hear.
Yeah. Do you think it's kind of looking onwards and upwards? Is there light at the end of the tunnel for New Jersey in terms of the restrictions? So do you think that each show it might get a little bit better in terms of fans attending, or is it something that just not quite yet there? Because I mean, for example, in the UK, we've been on complete lockdown. No events, nothing at all. And some of the promoters that I've spoke to have said, for the next show that we do, whenever that might be, we're going to want our talent to have been vaccinated. So that's kind of almost like a requirement that's coming up that some promoters are thinking. Is that anything? I mean, have you had those discussions with anyone, or has that been a thought at all?
Well, I mean, like, for instance, our governor leans more towards the let's take things slow side. When you look at other states, I believe Texas and Mississippi now completely reopened, 100%, no masks, no nothing. You can do whatever you want. In New Jersey, I think it's going to take a lot longer to get there. I do think, like I said, the percentages will probably increase, as time goes on. So maybe by May we're up to 40 or 50%. Maybe by August we're up to 60. But at the same time, like I said, the percentages don't mean anything, because to keep people spaced out, you're looking at, no matter what, about a quarter of what a space can hold, unless it's like a gigantic, 12,000 square foot convention center. But at the same time, still, they have to be spaced out. So I'm sure their capacity would be 10,000, but you could only have 2,500 spaced out or whatever it is. So I'm just hoping that the total number of people allowed, because it's 25 or 35% up to 150 people. So I'm hoping maybe the number will increase, so that way we could go to a bigger venue, maybe like 1,000-seat venue, and hold 30%, maybe have 300 people, as opposed to smaller spaces and only have like 50 to 80 people in there. But I think until the social distancing guideline is gone, you're not going to get more than what you really have percentage wise.
Yeah, and I mean, I think surely, once more and more people kind of get the vaccine, or the numbers start going down drastically, surely they'll lift the social distance, because it can't be a thing forever. It's not realistic to have people 6 feet apart forever, surely. I mean, eventually, once we're in a better place overall, and more people have the vaccine, maybe they then might be like, look, it's okay. They might still try and keep numbers lesser than what it was before, but they might be okay with kind of the distance not being so big. And do you know what I mean?
Oh, no, I agree. And I think it is something that, in my opinion, I think the rest of this year, it's still going to be there. I think next year it looks better. What really gave me a light at the end of the tunnel was seeing a couple of states here completely reopen, because I think that's going to set the trend. So once those two did it, maybe a couple more will do it in the next month, and a couple more. I know New York and New Jersey, because they were two of the hardest hit states, as well as California, we're going to be the last three to get rid of it, probably. But as more and more do it, then that puts more pressure on, our governors here to reduce the restrictions more and more. As more and more people get the vaccines, as more and more people, the death rate and the hospitalization rate is next to nothing. So I think we're already there in terms of it's nowhere near as serious as it was last year. So I think we're working in that direction. It's just, probably by our fourth show or something for the year, I'm hoping we'll be able to do more. If not, by our second year in business, we should be allowed to have more people in person.
Yeah, I mean, like you said, once the trend has been set, then you can, more and more people will feel comfortable about it, and it will become the norm, and it will kind of become okay again. I mean, like what they're doing with New Japan, what they've been doing there is, even with what they did in the Tokyo Dome, just this January, it's a good thing. I think it's pretty cool to see them kind of do that, and it's kind of you're not really shocked by it. It kind of looks right. They've done it in a way that it's presented itself as it's okay. Like we've got control of it. And I think if that kind of mentality can be brought over to the States, and like you said, more and more states are just opening up now, then people will feel okay about it. They'll be like, you know what, actually, it's fine. It's okay to do this.
Yeah, and we had one event so far. We had probably about 60 or 70 people in attendance. We had a full locker room, and there wasn't one coronavirus case that came out of it. So, it can be done. You have to adjust the scale appropriately and accordingly to whatever's going on, but it can be done. It can be done safely. Of course, accidents are going to happen, but thankfully nobody got sick from our show. Everything was okay. And, it's another example on a much smaller scale compared to New Japan that, yes, you can do it safely.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, it's exciting to hear some of the agreements that you've made. One of which, obviously, being the main one being Fight TV, Fight Global. I think that's pretty cool. I think that's looking exciting, because I think that the scale opportunity is just going to get more and more. What are some of the conversations you've had with your partner, kind of looking at that global side? Is there any kind of, I guess, plans or goals or milestones you have in your mind that you'd like to do in terms of reach, like outreach? Is it like, would you like to kind of do a show that's like geared towards Spanish speakers in Latin America, or like Japanese for Japanese? Is there anything like that kind of goes through your mind? Because this is the beginning of something global, and I mean it's in your name, so it's, if any promotion is going to do it, it's you.
It has to be, otherwise we'd be liars. So like the deal we signed with Fight Globe is a 3-year deal. They sort of act as like a talent manager, so they don't have a platform for the content. What they do is they find us a platform. So probably the best way that our shows could be on TV in the UK, for instance, would be Fight Globe, because they handle brokering deals with large TV networks, small TV networks in all countries around the world. We've had interest in 3 countries so far: Africa, India, and Germany. So we're waiting to hear back. They wanted to see the show first. I believe we actually were live in Africa as like a test run, see how their audience liked it. India and Germany wanted to see the show, make sure that it's up to standard or whatever before they start talking to us about an offer or anything. So they're really our best shot as far as like getting international TV deals or whatever. Fight TV, of course, is available pretty much everywhere in the world, so you can order it. I think they adjust like the cost and everything to different currencies already. I'm not sure. So that's the idea. As far as like us as a company, we are having it the commentary dubbed in Japanese and Spanish, because those are the two other biggest markets. The UK, thankfully, you guys understand English. We're all on the same page there, so we don't have to dub that over. But Japan, we got a commentator to do that so we could push it over there. Same thing with Mexico. We have it in Spanish. And as far as like talent goes, we have had talks with Tajiri in All Japan about doing a talent exchange. So we have access to them when the COVID restrictions are a little looser. Same thing with a whole bunch of other companies. New Japan had said to us basically, you help us, we'll help you. So we may have some New Japan talent outside of just Dickinson that we may be able to get on the show. And so we are trying, and that's, currently in the situation, obviously it's almost impossible to have shows in other countries. Right now, it's hard enough to even have shows in a different state. So one day we want to get over, have a show in Japan, have a show in UK, have a show all over the world. That's part of what we want to do. But we figured while we can't do that, how can we bring global here? So we try to hire talent that have worked Japan, that have worked Mexico, that have worked the UK. So that way the talent brings the global to us until we can bring the global to you.
Yeah, I think that's a good idea. And you have to take it step by step given the circumstance we're in. I think first and foremost, it's about, survival and then making it through this tough period. And then you can kind of see the growth kind of boom, because it's inevitably going to have a boom period. I'm sure of it. It has to, because everything that goes down like this has to eventually go back up, right? Yep. People are hungry for wrestling and they're hungry for content and for just good quality, shows again. They want to go to live events. So that's something that I think now is the perfect time that you can plant the seeds. You've made the agreement with Fight. You can use those tools and then slowly start spreading out. So when we do go back to normality, whether it's next year or whenever, you'll be ready. You'll have the fan base. Is that something that was kind of, in terms of marketing, is that anything that you've ever kind of thought about? I know that obviously speaking with All Japan, Tajiri and whatnot, that's a great thing because you can now tap into the Japanese market. But in terms of social media marketing, is that something that do you try to reach out to specific markets, or is it just here's my product here and here's for the world to see? How does that work?
Well, I mean, another guy that works with us, Alex, he's really our social media guy. It's a better question for him, but I'll answer it to the best of my ability. We have tried to reach out to any outlet we can. I know we've reached out to like Tokyo Sports and stuff like that, and similar in other countries as well. Japan is the country we all want to work in eventually, like have a big show over there. We're trying to work out deals with any wrestling company we can. The UK is another big one. Mexico, Africa, stuff like that. We like to be all over. So as far as like marketing goes, like at least in the beginning, we were using hashtags like hashtag AJPW, NJPW, just to try and maybe we'll snag somebody who was looking them up. It didn't really do much for us. So I think it's when we get into like magazines and newspaper articles over there, we'll probably be more successful. That's the main reason why we wanted to dub it over for other languages, because then it might help us get on their social media if it's in their language. Otherwise, that's another reason why, and I'd even quote John Cena on this one. He wanted to change WWE to be less promo heavy and more action heavy because he says that transcends language. And I thought that was genius. He's like, I'm trying to break WWE into China. At the time, they're probably there by now. But having an action-based platform means, okay, everybody can see it, they can understand it because it's physical, it's not language. So it's not, restricted by those. And so that was pretty much another reason aside from it's just our personal preference in wrestling.
For sure. I think the action is absolutely, it's a universal language. If you see a clothesline, anybody understands that in any country, I think once things go back to normal, like you said earlier, with kind of bringing in kind of the talent, you could bring in, you have that more global feel. You bring in somebody from India, for example, and then they kind of bring in the Indian market more so because they're going to root for their guy. So they're going to see and they're like, oh wow, and so it's kind of, and then you could bring in, somebody from Africa and somebody from Japan and China and so on and so forth, and just you could even do like a tournament and things like that. I'm sure you've had these conversations and thoughts kind of through your head.
Many till 6 in the morning, that much I could tell you. But like the original main event was Doering and Hammerstone, and Doering doesn't really have much of a career in the U.S. and Canada. His career was in Japan, multi-time Triple Crown champion, wrestled against Suwama. So we were like, well, he's here on this side of the world, so maybe if he was there, that would help us get a foot in the door with Japan. And then of course Canada went like full lockdown again, so we weren't able to bring him over. But it was thoughts like that in the beginning, and as restrictions loosen, then we're able to do it in a more like real approach, having like the actual talent that wrestle full time in Japan.
Yeah. Do you think that it's realistic to kind of see one day maybe you might be able to have a base, for example, in Tokyo, and then you can kind of run shows simultaneously? You could be doing shows in Jersey, around the world, and in Tokyo at the same time, kind of, is that something that is like, is that doable? Because obviously I'm not a promoter, so I don't know what it's like in terms of globally running a business, but is that something that can happen and will?
I mean, that was the initial plan, was one day to have like a joint headquarters, one in Tokyo, one in America. The actual logistics of it, when it happens, I don't know until I get there. But my girlfriend's from Japan, so I have family over there that I probably will ask them, like, is it possible for a foreigner Gaijin guy to come over here and have an office? Like, I don't know what the legalities are, but I know it's a way that it could be worked around and we could figure it out because other companies do it. So it's just when we get to a position when we have the capital behind us and we have the scale and the appeal behind us, then we will look at it. But for now, soon after the COVID restrictions lift, what we're hoping to do is maybe a joint show with a company in Japan and a company in UK and Mexico and stuff, because we could reach out to a promotion that's working with us, that we have that talent relationship with, and just say, well, how about we do a joint show? Even if it's under your banner, it's under our banner, who cares? We'll just have, we'll bring 5 or 6 of our own people over there. We'll put them up against 5 or 6 of your people, or we'll keep it like your matches, our matches, however you want to do it, and just put on, one hell of an event.
Yeah, and the sky's the limit. So I think we're speaking so early on. I think give it a year, 2 years, we're going to see these things become very real. I think, and then when it does, you'll kind of realize actually it's very possible, it's very doable, of course. I'd love to see you come to the UK. I'd love to see you do a show in London. I think that would be awesome.
That would be. And there's not that much wrestling in London anymore, right? I heard that a lot of the federations went out over there.
Yeah, it's not. Yeah, you have to drive out. Fortunately, the UK is a pretty small country. You could drive from top to bottom in like 6 hours or 7 hours or something, give or take. So it's not too bad. It's not too bad. But yeah, nothing's really happening in London. But there is a market there. I believe there is. I'm optimistic. I live in London, so there's definitely a market there, and I think that once I think everywhere you go with given correct marketing, you can make something happen for sure.
So, yeah.
What's your as a promoter? Because obviously we're all fans first and foremost. What is some of your kind of philosophy towards wrestling? Because I know that GSW and everything we're talking about here, it's about the hard hitting, it's about the action, it's about pure technical wrestling. Would you ever be kind of open to anything outside of that to kind of create diversity in the future, or is that, do you know what I mean? What is the kind of the vision that you have, your philosophy towards GSW?
I mean, we're open to anything. And I would never rule out anything ever transpiring on one of our shows. But as a filmmaker, less is more. Less speaking, more character and action and stuff like that. Let's see the physical traits about these people. And that translates. It's weird how similar wrestling and film are. And I think the best example I could ever give anybody is ask any wrestling fan. Doesn't matter if they are like, I love these like orange mimosa hot tub matches, or I like, whatever. what's your favorite match? They're never going to say that. They're always going to say, oh, it was like Taker and Shawn, or Cena and CM Punk, or whatever. Like, they're always going to cite what one of those really good matches were. So I think if you have a company that is only delivering that kind of product, then no matter what, fans are not going to hate it. You could still give them entertainment, and we plan to, but to a lesser degree. It's going to be less showy, more fighty, basically. But we would never rule out the idea of having some things that are funny. There's no reason. Like, I thought the segment between Holiday and Maddox, that actually went over really well. It was pretty funny to a degree, but it wasn't like, that's weird. Why would they do that on a wrestling show?
No, I completely agree. I think it's very aligned to your vision is aligned to what the brand is. So the thing is, like, a lot of these markets internationally, like, take India, for example, they love the sport aspect. They love that kind of competition aspect. It's part of the culture in many countries around the world, where it's just sport. They still view it as a legit sport in some places. So I think that giving it that feel and putting forward that message is only gonna kind of then translate into more growth in these kind of markets around the world. So it kind of ties in together if you think about it, which is awesome.
And I think even the fans that, are far gone and, lost in the, it is sports entertainment and blah, blah, blah. I think all of them yearn for when they didn't know. And when they were like, oh man, this is a real sport. And after they found out that it really wasn't, I think that's when a lot of them kind of lost their appeal for wrestling. And and a lot of people will say that you can never bring that back. And I don't think that's true. I think if you watch like an All Japan show, or you watch a New Japan show, you watch this and you're like, God, they're hitting each other hard. This looks real. You can still do it in a way where fans will check out their suspension of disbelief. And same thing, you're watching a movie. Everybody knows it's a movie, but if you have a product that's good enough to make you forget about it, then you don't think about it. And I think that's the best way to approach it, at least in our opinions, how we want to approach it. I think that's the way that will at least give us our little market. And, we're not finisher heavy, like, oh my God, you got to go out there and hit like 17 backflips to beat your opponent, and then like one punch and you get the pin. Like, there's no psychology to it. The idea is it's a simulated fight, and it builds up to who's going to hit their big move first. Okay. Then that makes it a dance. Who's going to do it? What's going to happen? It's not like, oh, they hit their move. All right, well, now that guy's going to hit his move, and then he's going to hit his move again, and then he's going to hit his move. It's like, and then eventually maybe somebody will win, but at that point, I don't even care. So it's a big psychological thing that needs to come back. And when you have it and present it that way, like, I was actually worried when we had our show that, like, almost all of our matches end with one finisher. I'm like, are people even going to get behind that anymore? Because it's like, you watch a show, you're like, oh, wow, he hit his finisher like 17 times. So I was a little worried that fans are, will be kind of like horror movies, where like in the beginning, if the villain just popped up, everybody would freak out. Nowadays, it's like you have to show them like sawing them in half to get them grossed out or something. And it's if you do it right, it doesn't matter.
Are there any like parallels to making movies and then producing a pro wrestling show? Are there any like you just mentioned with the horror movie? It's absolutely true what you say. I mean, back in the day, horror movies, like, the most simple thing was terrifying. You know what I mean? And then, like, I mean, things like The Shining and stuff. And it's like there was so many, like, it was done so well in terms of psychology and everything, the storytelling. And then obviously as time went on, I mean, now you've got things like Saw and Hostel, and they have to go to the extreme to just try and get like a pop. I mean, that's one example, but are there any other kind of parallels you can think of that tie in between movies and wrestling?
I think the thing that surprised me initially was that it's the exact same thing. At the end of the day, it's exactly like directing a movie. What do? You look for the talent, your cast. Okay, well, you're making a wrestling show. What do you look for? The talent. Okay, I send out the agreements, you sign the release form or whatever, sign the paperwork, I get you here, I pay you for whatever, I cover your travel, whatever we work out. And then we go through, all right, well, what's the story? How are we going to, make this happen? So we go over notes. It's not as scripted as a movie. Here's a sheet of paper, read it, basically. For wrestling, it's like you guys handle the creative, who's going over, what's going to happen, like, anything that needs to go over is what goes over. Maybe we'll send like a reference match or something, but the idea of like how we would go through a process for a film and how we would go through a process for putting a wrestling show together, almost the same. You think about how you would decorate the set, how you would decorate the location. The difference is like a live audience being there, but then you could argue that it's the same as doing theater. So it really ends up being almost the same thing. It's just, a film is going to be more subtle. A wrestling show is going to be more like hard hitting and, the spectacle of it. But it's really, at the end of the day, it's the same thing.
It definitely is. And I'm a big believer in that. Everything that goes into it from start to finish it really is. I mean, I think even Vince has said that before. He said we make mini movies. That's pretty much what they do. They make each match is almost like a mini movie because it's a story from start to finish.
I mean, it's television, like a cable TV drama, and the idea of a television show is I have to get people excited to see next show. So if it's a film, it's start to finish. This is like an ongoing series. Like the best example would be like a soap opera, Days of Our Lives, because it's been on since the dawn of time. Here's my week. These are the stories that are being told. You have your A story, B story, C story. And, little ones get wrapped up, but there's an overarching story that carries the show until that wraps up, and then you start a new one. So the idea is I have to leave some sort of a cliffhanger. So Hammer and Dickinson, that was the cliffhanger. Now, hopefully people want to see them fight at the second show, or Fatu running in and attacking Elgin. There's the cliffhanger that sets up for the next show. And then, what stories we tell at the next show to get you excited about August, I won't tell you. You're going to have to watch it.
Yeah, I think it's the best way. But you plant the seeds by getting that kind of getting those run-ins and things like that. It's exciting to see. But do you feel like your experience in film, are you glad that you have that background in it? Does that help you with wrestling? Because you started in wrestling. You're not 100% a film guy. You were in wrestling first. You trained, you've done some, things here and there, and then you kind of went into film school. So it's kind of like you've been back and forth. So are you glad you've done that looking back?
100%. I don't think the show would have been successful if I didn't have that experience. I mean, aside from I'm handling the technical side, the cameras and the live stream and stuff, which I couldn't do without the film knowledge. Otherwise, it would just be one camera pointed here and whatever you get, you get. But what I learned in wrestling was how to take a bump. I learned, how to work through some holds and some sequences and stuff like that. Bump, feed a comeback, whatever. I didn't learn anything about storytelling. I didn't learn anything about how to engage an audience. And you learn that more in film than anything. I learned, and I would say the best example would be ask some of the younger talent that hasn't quite figured out their character, that hasn't quite figured out what they want to do yet, and ask them how the conversation went with me, where I gave them some notes on how about, you add this to your character. How about the best example, I teach film production too. And what I say to everybody is if you think of every single part of you and your show as a story, then this is your story. It's not this. It always has to rise, hit that climax, and then come down. And you have a feature-length film. The film's this long. So then there is this, but then every scene has to have their own little one that slowly builds you up as you're going along that arch. So for instance, we had a wrestler who's like, I want to show the audience my physique. I'm in the gym all the time. I want to show it off. So I don't really want to put on like a jacket or something when I come to the ring. And I'm like, well, I think you're thinking about it wrong, because the idea is you're going to take the jacket off eventually. So why not build up to that moment and make your entrance like the anticipation of when you take off your jacket? That way you come out, oh, it's cool, you're teasing it, the jacket's open a little bit, and then it becomes like, like Shawn Michaels when he goes into the ring, and then it's part of his gimmick when he takes the jacket off. That is a story in of itself. And then the match is a story, and then the next show. And I would never have learned any of that stuff if it wasn't for film production, how to actually like make everything part of an overall narrative.
Yeah, it's so true what you say. And also the build up to taking the jacket off and that kind of selling that, that's everything, like you said, is a mini story. It has a purpose and a reason. So it's very true. It's very true. I think it's great to see somebody come from the film world or have had experience in that and then now be able to apply it. Because there's a lot of promoters that, they love wrestling, so they're just promoters. And then you kind of get stuck in that kind of that bubble where you are just a wrestling promoter and it's kind of hard to kind of get that experience from elsewhere. You kind of have to hope that it comes. Whereas with you sound very hands-on. You can actually teach people things and actually kind of guide them given the experience you have. So just kind of help them think about those things like that example that you'd given.
Yeah, and that's... I was asked once before, a long time ago, when we first started, they're like, do you think it would have been this, like, do you think, like, WWE, for instance, they said Vince doesn't hire anyone who's ever been in wrestling. Do you think that's a good approach? Do you think it should only be people in wrestling? Do you think that, like, your hybrid is the best of both worlds? And I think having no people with wrestling experience is not good, because you have no reference to make it translate. And I also, like, the ideas that I give the talent, I'm still not 100% sure if it'll go over or if it'll work. It's just like, here's a thought. What do you think? Let's try it. Let's see what happens. But I think at least having some frame of reference for the wrestling community helps in that regard. So if you have the film knowledge, if you have some wrestling knowledge, then I think it's a better overall product as opposed to all of one and none of the other.
Yeah, for sure. Well, Catalyst second show is May 22nd, so it's less than 2 months away. Is there anything you can give away kind of leading up to it? Anything that you can kind of excitement wise that you can kind of tell the fans?
I would say if you want to get an idea of what it's going to be like, watch the first show. That energy is going to translate and multiply to the next show. We have Elgin and Fatu, we have Kimber and Trish, we have Dickinson and Hammerstone for the title, his first defense. So we've already announced 3 huge matches. We have the Women's Global Champions Cup tournament to crown the first ever women's champion. It starts at Catalyst and it ends at the following show, which is actually going to be a 2-night, kind of like Wrestle Kingdom, back-to-back nights to crown the first champion. So, it be part of history. As far as what else I can tell you, it'll be announced as we get the matches put together. Deonna Purrazzo is signed to be in the tournament. She'll be there. Hyan will be back for the tournament, and we'll announce the other names as they come.
Very exciting. Very, very exciting. And it's early days, but the future looks very bright. So I can't wait for what this next show is holding for us. I'm eager and ready to see it. So thank you so much. Thank you for your time. Thank you for taking the time to talk to me. And Catalyst is the next event. So any of my listeners in Dubai and in London, guys, check it out. It's on Fight TV. It's like you said, it's accessible all around the world, and that's the best thing about it.
Yeah, thank you so much. I appreciate it.
No, thank you, Brandon. All right, well, thanks, and we'll speak soon. Take care.
You too.
Thank you.